Hello! Welcome to Apple Business Connect, a history. Apple Business Connect is Apple's answer to Google Business Profiles. Like Google Business Profiles, Apple Business Connect acts as a digital front door for local businesses. In this video, we're going to give a little bit of history of Apple Maps, some information about what makes it really special, and why its audience is the most important audience for local marketers over the next 15 years. Surprisingly, the Apple Business Connect story starts in 1864 when Richard Donnelly founded the R.R. Donnelly Printing Company in Chicago. The business was quite prosperous and produced such materials as the Encyclopedia Britannica, Time magazine, Model T Ford promotional material, and even the Sears Roebuck catalog. R.R. Donnelly was at the center of information revolution circa 1864. Then, about 100 years after its founding, R.R. Donnelly created a division called the Cartographic Services Division to capitalize on the boom in road maps that was enabled by the recent standardization of the U.S. highway network. This became a huge business when gas station chains started providing these maps for free to their customers. Along the way, the Cartographic Services Division captured a huge amount of mapping data for the US and Canada. In 1992, the Cartographic Services Division was spun off as Geosystems Global Corporation to address opportunities with all that digitized map data they collected. 3 years later, Geosystems Global Corporation fulfilled its mandate by launching MapQuest in 1995. MapQuest was a huge hit and was truly state-of-the-art by the standards of the time. This is before map data was available on mobile phones, so MapQuest was available only on computer desktops. Any driving directions needed to be printed out in advance, but people were happy to do it. MapQuest offered updated map information with turn-by-turn directions and offered it for free. In fact, MapQuest was such a big hit, it held an IPO in 1999 as its own publicly traded company. Good times only got better, as AOL acquired 100% of MapQuest in December of '99 for $1.1 billion. But that wasn't even the biggest deal that AOL made that winter, as it merged with Time Warner in January of 2000, creating what would seem to be the dominant internet empire. AOL's entire strategy was built around offering a walled garden in which users would log into AOL, which in turn would provide all the internet content and services that a consumer might ever want. So AOL was going to be the gateway to the internet, and MapQuest was going to be the only mapping solution in that gateway. So the mapping wars are over in 2000 before they ever even got a chance to begin. MapQuest is going to dominate mapping forever. But hold on. A little band of rebels in Germany, of all places, is conjuring up some competition. In 1999, Keyhole was founded as a spin-off from a 3D gaming tech company who had created a killer geography map for their gaming applications. Turns out that people were far more interested in the mapping tech than they were in the game. Keyhole was a desktop application that would use updates distributed on CDs to keep their maps current. It was a popular tool for real estate developers, urban planners, as well as defense and intelligence agencies. However, it still wasn't profitable and was facing bankruptcy. Keyhole's salvation was found in the 2003 Iraq War. Cable news channels were desperate to show satellite maps of the battlefields. Keyhole shrewdly traded free access to its software for on-air attribution, so all these maps that were being shown had a little notation giving credit to Keyhole. Consumers started Googling Keyhole and demand for their application took off. However, just like any good Shark Tank entrepreneur, Keyhole didn't have the funding required to keep up with consumer demand. Fortunately, Keyhole's interests intersected with those of the CIA, and the CIA's in-house venture capital firm called In-Q-Tel gave Keyhole the funding required to satisfy all those customers who became suddenly interested in computer mapping. At the same time in 2003, the Australian firm Where2 Technologies rolled out their own web-based user interface for visualizing map data. This is a big deal on browser-based applications, as this type of graphical rendering was only previously possible using a desktop application. Just as Google Docs broke the browser barrier to bring Microsoft Word functionality to the internet, Where2 did the same thing for mapping software. Then in 2004, the young geniuses at Google recognized that about 20% of all searches had some form of local intent, like restaurants near me, shoe store near me, or hotels near me, and so on. And of course, like all young geniuses at Google, they recognized that there was money to be made. So, just like all good tech behemoths, Google went on a buying spree. They snapped up Where2 and Keyhole in 2004, bringing together two advanced and complementary mapping technologies under the Google umbrella. It didn't take Google long to pull these pieces together and launch Google Maps in February of 2005. Like MapQuest, it was restricted to computer desktops as smartphones were not in wide enough usage to warrant the development of a mobile app. That and the crappy mobile operating systems of the time could never have supported that robust of an application. From the beginning, Google was viewing Google Maps through a commercial lens. Notice that in the very second sentence of the announcement, they referenced the use case of consumers searching for hotels near them. Google's plan to monetize searches with local intent was coming to fruition. The crucial step towards the mobile mapping world we live in today was the release of a mobile app. And of course, Google was going to launch its first mobile app on the most popular smartphone platform of the time, BlackBerry. The thing was pretty buggy and limited, but it was easy to see the promise of mobile mapping. Apple agreed with that sentiment, and in 2007, iPhone users woke up to find a Maps icon on their home screen. This Maps application was Google Maps, although it was not labeled as a Google product. These were back in the good old days when Apple and Google were the best of friends. It's hard to imagine now, but at the time, Google CEO Eric Schmidt was also a member of the Apple board of directors. This was a cozy relationship where there appeared to be no opportunity for conflict. By 2008, it was really clear that Google's plan for mapping dominance was working. It was at this time that maps.google.com overtook visits to MapQuest. So at this point, Google has the only mapping map on Apple devices, BlackBerry devices, and of course Android devices as they acquired Android in 2005. Clearly, Google has won the mapping battle forever. Game over again, but for real this time. But what about Waze? We'd regret it if we didn't talk about this pioneer in online mapping with a large and passionate fan base. In 2006, Israeli programmer Ehud Shabbatai founded a community project known as Free Map Israel. It was a crowdsourced application that allowed folks in Israel to share their location and driving speed to guide drivers towards less congested routes. And then, in 2009, Free Map Israel was relaunched as Waze and was available on both Apple and Android devices. Not only did this innovative startup present a competitive challenge to Google, it could also be acquired by a competitor like Facebook to round out their online services and provoke a direct challenge to Google Maps. So, of course, in 2013, Google acquired Waze for $1.3 billion. Just $200 million more than AOL paid for MapQuest just 14 years earlier. This was a great deal for Google. RBC capital markets analyst Mark Mahaney agreed with that sentiment, and he stated it quite clearly. Google's acquisition of Waze eliminates Waze as a potential acquisition target for competitors who could use the app's collection of data and millions of users to bolster their own location-based products. So now Google has really cornered the online mapping market. If the game wasn't over before, it sure was now. But then in September of 2012, Apple Maps was released with iOS 6. It was made the default mapping application for iOS, replacing Google Maps from the prized location it held for the last 4 years. Why did this happen? Turn-by-turn directions require tight integration of the mapping application and the operating system's GPS functionality. Google had enabled turn-by-turn direction in the Android version of Google Maps, but this was not available in the iPhone version. Google was unwilling to collaborate with Apple to enable turn-by-turn navigation, which forced Apple's hand. But Apple didn't stop with just replacing Google Maps as the default application on iPhones. Apple also removed Google Maps from the Apple App Store, making Google Maps only available on the web app or through a browser. This change made many Apple users nervous. However, surely Apple would not have made this drastic change without rolling out a great product as a replacement to Google Maps, but that wasn't the case. It was clear from the beginning that Apple Maps was not ready for prime time. From horribly distorted images to buildings that seemed to be placed in the middle of rivers, and most embarrassingly, the inability to locate the iconic New York City Apple Store, Apple Maps was not off to a good start. And not surprisingly, the press noticed this. The business press really engaged in some serious schadenfreude, and a cottage industry was created overnight to slam Apple for their transgressions against their users and poor old Google. In fact, it got so bad that Apple CEO Tim Cook had to apologize publicly for daring to roll out such an insufficient product. And as you can see in the subheader, even the apology wasn't particularly well received, as the reporters were noting that the fiasco tells us a lot about the company's attitude and management. Soon after, Apple had to respond to the demands of iPhone users, and the Google Maps app was restored to the Apple Store less than a year after its removal. Worst of all, earlier reports indicated that Waze was the only application to gain market share in this whole fiasco. The conventional wisdom at the time was that yes, Google Maps was still the leader and had defended off its last potential challenge. Game over. Fast forward 11 years, and not only has Apple Maps grown to 500 million users, it is now beloved by the same business press that wrote them off 11 years earlier. What happened? It was game over. Google won. What's the deal? Tune in to our next video on Apple's return to figure out the rest of the story. Thanks so much for watching.